This is Ruumi's guide to getting started with grazing management. We'll be sharing tips and tricks to help you improve your farm business profitability and resilience. In this video, we're looking at the principles of grazing management. So principle number one, avoiding overgrazing. We need to work with nature if we're to be as productive and resilient as possible. Working with nature means grazing the plants as they evolve to be grazed with our ruminant animals. As a plant grows, such as this grass, it's obviously taking in energy from the sun as well as carbon dioxide and through a process of photosynthesis producing oxygen and carbohydrate to use for growth. Some of the energy that it's producing is going in a number of ways. Some of it's obviously going into producing energy for that growth above and below ground, and some of that energy is also passing through into the soil as root exudates in exchange for water and for nutrients. As the plant grows, some of the energy is also going into the root system and into the stem, and it's being stored there. And the reason it's being stored there so that when a grazing event happens and an animal comes along and grazes the plant, although the plant's left with no or very little leaf area, it can use the energy stored within it to grow that first leaf in order to photosynthesize, to produce more energy, to grow more leaves for the system to start again. Overgrazing is where we leave the animals in one place for so long that the plant has chance to regrow after the first grazing event and then is eaten again before it's fully recovered. So the plant is beneath being grazed off, it's just started to regrow, it's put that first leaf up, and an animal comes along and eats it again. Avoiding overgrazing is avoiding grazing the plants before they're fully recovered, and that really means being able to move animals reasonably often. The second principle of grazing management is a rest period. So what is a suitable rest period? Well, the rest period depends on the time of year. When pasture growth is high, because temperatures are warm and there's plenty of moisture, the rest period can reduce. Basically, after the grazing event, plants are recovering more quickly, root reserves are being replenished, and they're ready for grazing in less time. During periods of cold weather, or where there's a moisture deficit, the rest period needs to be increased. Because those rest periods vary, there's obviously a need to kind of vary maybe the number of paddocks on farm or the number of groups, but in many ways the farming system kind of lends itself to that. During the growing season, when the rest period can be short, we've got more groups of ewes and lambs, we've got more groups of cows and calves. So that means that because the rest period's shorter, we can avoid overgrazing if we move the animals reasonably regularly, let's say every 4 or 5 days, through a few paddocks. So if we want to avoid overgrazing during the growing season, but we want to provide plants with enough rest period, if we're trying to get to 30 days, well, with only 4 paddocks, we're going to need to be spending about at least 7 days per paddock. And the issue is that's when we're going to start to overgraze, which isn't good for productivity, nor for the animals, nor for the plants or our soil. If we maybe see what 8 paddocks starts to look like, if we need to get a rest period of around 30 days, but now we've got 8 paddocks, we only have to spend 4 days per paddock. So we're going to avoid really any overgrazing, keep productivity high for the plants and animals, and be able to move around those paddocks with quite a bit of ease. If growth slows up, we can get to 40 days, we can get to 48 days if we stay in each paddock for 6 days, and we're at risk of some overgrazing, but far less than if we just have 1 paddock per group. Come out of the growing season into the non-growing season, into winter basically, the number of groups on farm starts to fall. So whether through the growing season we may have had 8, 10, 12 groups of stock on farm, for beef and sheep farms anyway, as we head into the winter season, we may be dealing with 2 or 3 or 4 groups at the most. So where there was 8 paddocks over here, we can probably join them into another 8 paddocks around them. So then that one group's maybe got 16 paddocks. All of a sudden it becomes very possible to get out to 100 days or 120 days of rest just by being aware of how we manage our number of groups on farm and how we start to manage and work with the kind of permitted periods of on time to avoid overgrazing. So if we can follow the 2 principles of grazing management, which is avoiding overgrazing and providing a suitable rest period, we can work with nature really to be as productive as possible and to maintain pasture composition, increase plant resilience and improve our soil health and our animal performance.
Improve your soil health and increase your farm's productivity. Get started with Ruumi today by clicking on the link in the description.